Ladies and gentlemen, EC3.
This week's episode of As the Six-Sided Ring Turns is one for the books, baby. This was, I don't even really know how to describe it. I mean, this company takes 2 steps forward, 10 steps back, it seems like. Listen, the reality is, it's not fair the way that this company is judged. Negative publicity sticks to them so much harder than it does WWE or ROH or New Japan or anyone else. So if you're GFW, you got to be doing everything you can to keep your name clean, keep your employees out of scandals, keep all your accounts paid up. Any bad press is going to be magnified times 10 because people want to see you fail. That's the reality, right? That's the reality of where you are if you're GFW. People want to see you fail. So anything you do is going to just be magnified. It's not right, it's not fair, but it's the reality that we're living in. So Impact was a really good show this week. But guess what? All anybody wants to talk about is all the stuff that came out off the field. They want to talk about the Sports Illustrated article. They want to talk about what Meltzer had to say. They want to talk about what Mike Johnson had to say. And guess what? We're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about all of it. But before we talk about that, I am going to get into this episode of Impact because it was a good show. And if you're listening to this, you are probably at least on some level an Impact fan, or at least you like to keep up with what's going on, maybe through my show. So if it's your first time listening, I don't really do reviews because you can find reviews anywhere. So I'm not going to just sit there and go segment by segment and tell you what happened. I'm just going to more tell you about something I liked, maybe something I didn't like, and something I kind of want to, and something I would like to see happen. I call that yes, please, no, please, and please, please. So here we go. Now, these 2 didn't quite make the list, but these are 2 segments that I loved. And I just like some other stuff better. But here's my honorable mention. So the Taryn Terrell and Sienna versus Gail Kim and Ali segment, that match was pretty good. I mean, the match itself was okay, but really what happened after the match is where the excitement happened, right? So Sienna and Taryn Terrell, as a team, I like them because Sienna has this just bad attitude thing that just comes off so well. And, you know, that's the way that heels should be. When you get 2 heels on a team, unless they're working together against a common enemy, then the vibe between those 2 guys should pretty much be, look, I don't need you, you don't need me. I don't like you, you don't like me. But we're going to work together just to get this done because we're both bad guys, right? And I felt like Taryn Terrell and Sienna both definitely had that going on. And by the way, Taryn Terrell continues to look like Taryn Terrell, and that's good enough for me, okay? Josh Matthews had a line on commentary during this match that I thought was really interesting. He said, it's like these old wrestlers who show up for catering and a handshake. He said, nobody wants to hear about your career. And I was like, yo, that was oddly specific. He was definitely talking to somebody. I'm not sure exactly who. That might have been another callback to Booker T's interview when he talked about his time in TNA, but I found that interesting. So the match between Gail Kim and Ali and Sienna and Taryn Terrell ends with Ali doing a crossbody off the top rope. Sienna catches her, rolls her over into a pin, and she attempts to grab the tights. But here's where this got funny. Ali wears a very tight-fitting costume. So as Sienna was like grabbing, trying to grasp onto some tights to pull, I was like, man, she better she better stop digging. I don't know what she's gonna find, but so that was kind of a funny moment just as I was watching it happen. But after Sienna gets the pin, Sienna and Taryn Terrell continue to beat down Gail, Kim, and Allie after the match. And then Rosemary runs out to try and stop the post-match beatdown. So Rosemary comes in with the babyface fire. You know, she's beating up Sienna. She's beating up Taryn Terrell. But then eventually the heels overcome her, right? So the heels are beating her down. And then the lights drop. The lights drop and the music hits. And this is the debut of Taya Valkyrie. Now, you guys probably know Taya from Lucha Underground and John Morrison's Instagram, but she's pretty dope. I mean, like, if you've ever seen her in action, you know, she competes a pretty rough style. Like on Lucha Underground, she competes against the men, and she really has no problems keeping up with the physicality. Obviously, she's not a big woman, so, you know, truly keeping up with the physicality of a man is not really something she's going to do. But, you know, again, for someone who's her size, she does a good job, like, not appearing intimidated, and she wrestles a rough style. And I think you guys are really going to like her if you haven't seen her wrestle yet. She has presence too. When she walked out, she felt like a big deal. She seemed like a big deal coming in. And as she's coming to the ring, her and Sienna start to get in each other's face. They're, you know, kind of jumping at each other as if they're getting ready to fight. And then Taya switches up and beats down Rosemary. So now we know Taya is going to be a heel. And yeah, I mean, I kind of like where that puts the Knockouts division, because more and more, whether people realize it or not, Rosemary is becoming a pretty big deal. People really like her. The crowd really responds to her well. And now that you have Taya, who's going to come in and be someone who seems like a big deal as a heel, that's going to put you with, you know, kind of two people that the fans are really interested in, really focused on, and that could definitely be a feud going forward that I'd be interested to see. You know, I want to see what Rosemary looks like against Taya, because Taya is no joke. So I like that, the way they debuted Taya. Jim Cornette had a segment in the ring that I also liked. He came out and was pretty much introducing the main event of the evening. Now, this wasn't at the start of the show. He was just kind of talking about, you know, the main event that was already planned, that everyone's already going to see, with Eli Drake and Matt Sydal. And he kind of says something that tipped me off here. He says, if he had to put money on it, he thinks Sydal is walking out as the champ tonight. And, you know, whenever anybody says that, you know, their job is just to kind of lead you in a misdirection kind of way. And so as soon as he said that, I'm like, well, Sydal's definitely not winning. Plus, Eli Drake just got the championship. So for him to lose the title right now would seem really odd to me. But as he's finishing up what he had to say, Johnny Impact comes out, and, you know, he kind of makes his case saying that, you know, he wants to be the champion. The crowd was really into this. They really like Johnny Impact. He's one of the, I would say, you know, he's one of the more popular people on the roster already. And again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because he's been gone from WWE long enough to where he doesn't have the feel of a guy who just came there straight from WWE. And so I'm definitely okay with that. Now, here's where this segment got interesting. As Johnny Impact is kind of stating his case for why he wants to be the number one contender, LAX comes out. LAX is obviously upset because Low Key was in line for a title match against Alberto El Patron before El Patron got himself stripped of the title. And so Low Key was pretty upset. Low Key is getting in Johnny Impact's face, and he had one line that really stuck here. He told him, he said, "This isn't WWE. This ain't Lucha Underground. This is Global Force B." And so, and he had so much intensity, man. Like, he really just looked like he wanted to fight, man. Low Key is an intense dude by all accounts, and this was no different. I mean, he definitely brought that intensity that made it feel like a real confrontation right here. And the way that even the LAX guys were trying to hold him back, you know, it felt like there was an element of realness here. And especially considering the fact of what we heard that Low Key has since at least on his part, in his mind, he's parted ways with GFW. And the reason for that was because he was unhappy with where he was planned to be slotted going forward. He wanted to be in the world title picture, and they had plans for him in the X division. And knowing that now, it makes it feel like there was a lot of reality in that promo for him. Like he was really coming from a place of saying what he was really feeling. I think he's very upset. And if you want to be honest about it, he has every right to be upset. Loki's been in this business for a long time, and he's been here for this company for a long time. You can understand him feeling like he deserves an opportunity to prove himself in the main event in the world title picture, especially considering the fact that Matt Sydal is someone who's, low-key size or even smaller and is getting a world title shot later in the show. So I think you can understand Loki's frustrations right there. So that was a really, really good segment, man. It was super intense. Cornette set up a match for the following week where Johnny Impact will take on Loki. And I got to tell you, I'm really looking forward to seeing that match just because of that intensity that Loki brought to this promo segment. I think, that match is going to be something to see, because how is Loki going to react, right? How is he going to react to a match where he knows that someone is in line for an opportunity that he wants? Johnny Impact is probably going to go over, but is Loki going to kind of take his pound of flesh during that match? So I think that's definitely something to watch for as that match is going on. Another thing that really kind of almost made my pleases this week was the Grado Laurel Van Ness segment. Now, I'm not anti-comedy in wrestling, but I think wherever you place it, it has to be done right and it has to be done well. And this was done well. So Grado goes to break up with Laurel Van Ness because the whole reason he was trying to marry her is because he needed a green card. But last week he found out that she's Canadian, and so marrying her would not get him a green card. So he goes to her today to kind of break it off, and she's kind of smiling like, oh no, it's okay. But you see her in her head having these violent outbursts and kind of going crazy and rubbing the makeup all over her face. And you can tell that she's going to come back as the hot mess Laurel Van Ness. So again, I thought this was done well. It was outside of the realm of normal, but it was still entertaining. It was still good. So that's another, good thing that they had on this show. All right. So those are some things I liked, but didn't quite make my pleases. Here are my yes please, my no please, and my please please. All right. So the thing I really liked on this show, the thing that had me saying yes please, was the Triple Mania video package. Now, all in all, they probably dedicated about 20 minutes of showtime to this video package. And what they did individually was talk about different experiences or different situations that various guys on the GFW roster were in as they were going through Triple Mania. Now, this was able to cover a lot of TV time, and it was able to cover the TV time in what I think was just a very, very smart way. So we saw Andrew Everett and DJ Z. By the way, haven't seen DJ Z in a while. Good to know he's doing okay. We saw Andrew Everett and DJ Z. They were in a match. So we saw highlights of them, kind of backstage, getting ready, little interview pieces of a big match they were going to be in. We got to see Lashley, who was in a battle royal, and Moose was also in the battle royal. And it turned out that Moose actually eliminated Lashley from the battle royal. So Lashley was pretty upset. They grabbed Lashley backstage and, asked him how Dan Lambert might feel about what just happened. And Lashley said Lambert was pissed because Lambert probably didn't even want him to be there. And then he mentioned something about having a fight planned for December. And he also says that he's done with wrestling. Now, that was interesting, right? That was news to me. And And so, I mean, that was a huge storyline piece, right? I mean, like, that was without a doubt a huge storyline piece. And to do that here, I think was very interesting. That was obviously if that alone would have made this video package useful and something that forwards storylines. But there was more. Oh, yes, there was more. And next we get Johnny Impact. All right. So we get backstage interviews with Johnny Impact as he's preparing for his ladder match between himself, Phantasma, and Tejano. And Johnny Impact talks about, what an honor it is to have all those titles, his match that he has coming up. And he also talks about Eli Drake. And he says that, Eli Drake may have left the gauntlet for the gold match with the global title, but he says that title is actually his. So again, they're in storyline mode the whole time that they're there. This is quality stuff. It's forwarding the stories that are taking place at the Impact Zone. And then we come back and we see highlights of Johnny Impact in this match. And by the way, I feel like I want to find this match online and see how it played out, because that match actually looked pretty good from all the highlights that we had here. Of course, well, if you don't know, Johnny Impact actually retained. He's the champion of like 3 different divisions in AAA, and all 3 of those titles were on the line in this triple threat match. So they come back and give us the Rosemary Sexy Star situation. Now, this was kind of the hook that everyone was going to be looking forward to as this week was coming up. They showed a teaser that they would be covering the situation, and people were, posting like, oh, that'd be really classless if they turn this into a storyline, blah, 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 blah. And listen, in the wrestling business, who's to say what's a work and what's not anymore? To be honest, if they were smart, this would be a work, right? Like, this would be something where everyone was in it. The people from AAA were in on it, and the people from GFW were in on it, and they just get everybody because it created real interest and real emotion. So when they got to this part of the video package, they show what happens in the ring, and you hear Jeremy Borash, in a backstage interview saying, that unexpected things happen. We see Jeff Jarrett backstage looking like he was trying to fight someone, also looking fat and drunk. And I'm not sure how real the wanting to fight someone was. There were people trying to hold him back, and he's like, oh, no, just let me talk to him. Let me talk to him. And I'm like, look, man, I've worked at enough bars. I've been in enough bars where I've seen people that are really trying to fight, and that didn't really look like somebody that was trying to fight. What it looked like is somebody who is, trying to act tough. We've all seen that guy, the guy that's really, really tough as long as there's somebody between him and the person that he's trying to get to, or that he's pretending to try to get to. That looked a lot more like that to me. So, and here's another thing too. With his behavior seeming kind of wild and erratic, I just gotta say, man, that reminds me so much. If you remember the sound clip I played last week of Karen Jarrett backstage screaming at the top of her lungs at the American Top Team guys. Now, again, we know that that was obviously part of the storyline, but it's just the uncalled for turn up to 2011 just right away. I mean, Jeff Jarrett's behavior and his alleged drunkenness in the situation, it really just kind of falls right in line with that type of behavior, that type of attitude. So, yeah, I mean, like, we didn't get any more information about that situation than we had before, but it was interesting to see backstage of what the reaction might have looked like. Jeff Jarrett said that their alliance with AAA is stronger than ever, and they're going to continue to work together going forward. Ultimately, I thought this was just a great way to kill TV time. I mean, not kill TV time. Kill TV time is like, when you have somebody go interview and talk about nothing for 15 minutes. Killing TV time is what Monday Night Raw does to start the show every week. That's killing TV time. But I thought this was actually good. it took you out of the impact zone and into an arena that was filled with 20. I heard estimates during this package of 22,000 people, 30,000 people, and even higher. So it took you into an arena with a lot of people at a very lively show, and out of the impact zone. And I thought that was good, man. You know, it's good for the viewer to switch up the viewing experience for a few minutes. And so I was definitely a fan of that. I really liked that. Now, my no please goes to the LAX segment. And it wasn't so much about LAX, right? LAX had a match against some jobbers, some guys whose names I didn't even get. Didn't really matter. It was a squash. But after that, guess who comes out? OVE comes out. Now, OVE has had 2 matches, one of which looked horribly sloppy, and they're challenging LAX for the World Tag Team titles. And then Conan says that they're going to do it the way they want to do it. So he tells OVE to show up to the Crash promotion and they'll have their title match there. And I think that's very interesting because, once again, I love the idea of taking the camera out of the impact zone, and let's see this match happen in front of a crowd that is enjoying and reacting to what's going on. So I'm interested. Let's see where that goes. But why in the world does OVE deserve a tag team title shot? Who have they beaten? Again, they've had 2 matches, both against jobber tag teams. One of them didn't even look especially good. So how in the world is OVE the number 1 contenders for the title? How do they have the right to just step up and demand a title shot? That doesn't make any sense to me. So OVE getting a title match, you get my no please. And finally, my please this week goes to Eli Drake. Once again, listen, Eli Drake is going to be a big part of this show each and every week because, in my opinion, he's the flag waver, the standard bearer right now for Impact Wrestling. And that's the way it should be because he's the world champion. And he had the main event against Matt Sydal for the world title. They did a video package for Matt Sydal leading up to the match. If you were not previously initiated with Matt Sydal, this was a good way to kind of just get informed about who he is and what he brings to the table. And also, you know, give him the character piece because that's really what counts. That's what's going to make you, you know, either like him and want to root for him or not care. And so they did a nice video package with Matt Sydal before the match. This match was a good contrast in styles. Eli Drake can do a lot of things, but he's typically more of a brawler. You know, he has more of a ground game. And as we know, Matt Sydal gives you all the flippity dippity that you like in your 5'6" wrestlers. So I thought it was a really interesting. It was an interesting contrast of styles in the match, and it made for a really good match. I like the finish of the match. Matt Sydal goes up to the ropes. I guess he's going for, you know, one of his high-flying attacks. And Chris Adonis, who's playing the role of Eli Drake's lackey, he jumps up on the apron to interfere. Matt Sydal gives him a forearm to knock Chris Adonis off of the apron. He goes back up to the top rope. But at this point, Eli Drake grabs the world title and smashes him over the head with it. You know, knocks him down, gives him the gravy train for the win. And let me just pause on that for a second. Is Gravy Train not the worst name for a finishing maneuver that you've ever heard? But you know what? I kind of like it because it's different and it's very Eli Drake, man. Eli Drake has his own style. He has his own style. You know how the cool kids know what's cool before you do, right? Like, I mean, it's one of those things. And sometimes what the cool kids say is cool just because they say it's the cool thing and they're the cool kids. And that's kind of how Eli Drake is, man. Eli Drake is the cool kid. And if he says Gravy Train is the popping name for a finishing move, then damn it, Gravy Train is the popping name for a finishing move. And so, Eli Drake defeated Matt Sydal with the Gravy Train. Now, the thing that I really liked about Eli Drake getting this win is I thought it was a good heelish win, right? You have your champion looking like the title's in jeopardy. So therefore, you are making the opponent look good, making him look like he could have been the world champion if only the interference didn't happen. And once Eli Drake comes away with the win, you're hating him, right? You're hating him because he stole a victory away from the babyface who almost had him, almost became the world champion. And so, listen, man, you got to love it. I mean, Ric Flair made a living for years like that. So I was a big fan of that. And I think we need to see more and more and more of that. I'm a big fan of the idea of Eli Drake winning matches just like that for the next year. I mean, why not? And that's really where I'm going with this, right? So Eli Drake got his win over Matt Sydal. And it was the type of win where if you're looking at things from a fair and square perspective, you can't feel like Eli Drake deserved that win. And that's called getting heat. And I want to see more and more heat for Eli Drake because I want this title reign to be epic. I want Eli Drake to be the star that carries the GFW brand or whatever brand it's going to be called. We'll get into that later, into the future. I think he's the right guy. He's got all the tools and he's someone that the crowd will get behind. So GFW, Eli Drake, everyone, Anthem, please, please make Eli Drake's title run epic. So that was Impact. That was my yes, please, my no, please, and my please, please from this week. But, you know, let's be honest, man. That was a good show. That was a really good show. But nobody wants to talk about that show, right? Nobody wants to talk about that really good show that took place. And that's the entire problem with this company. Because as good as this show was, all anybody wants to talk about is the article that came out on Sports Illustrated, and then the news that came out about Jeff Jarrett, and then the reports from Meltzer, the reports from Mike Johnson. And so we're going to get into all of that. So here we go. This all started with a report. I saw that the first thing I saw was I just happened to go to the Impact website and I see a note. It said GFW update. And so I clicked on it and it said that Jeff Jarrett would be taking an indefinite leave. And I'm like, that's interesting. Okay. And then I'm like, all right, well, let me see what the wrestling news people have to say. So I go back to Twitter and then I see an article come up from Sports Illustrated. And the article from Sports Illustrated said that Anthem is apparently hemorrhaging money and they want out of the wrestling business and they're looking to sell and Jeff Jarrett is out of the picture. And I'm like, oh, bleep. All right. So let me just let me give you all the timeline stuff and then I'll come back with my own reactions. All right. So then somewhere along the line, a report came out from Dave Meltzer where he said that they're looking to sell the tape library to WWE. And, you know, just Dave Meltzer is always good for all the doom and gloom stuff, right? I don't know when's the last time Dave Meltzer has reported anything positive about this company. And that's not me complaining. That's a fact. I don't know. Now, it's also a fact that I don't follow Dave Meltzer. I don't like subscribe to his newsletter, and I'm not one of those people that's hanging on every word he says. And even when I look in some of the Facebook groups, I see there are people who are completely, you know, just at the teat of Meltzer, waiting for his next thing, his next little bit of information, and they take it like the gospel. So, you know, I'm not one of those people. You know, it is what it is for me. So, you know, Meltzer tweeted all the doom and gloom in the world, you know, for sale, sign up, blah, 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 blah. And then I see later that Mike Johnson printed kind of a few retractions. Now, I will say this. Mike Johnson is the wrestling news source that I trust when it comes to Impact, GFW, whatever. Because most of the writers that I see who cover or tweet or mention Anthem, GFW, TNA, whatever, they all kind of come from this place where it feels as though they have some sort of bone to pick. Like they, like it almost feels like they're just picking on the company. And I don't understand it. Like, I don't get it. Why would you make, a wrestling company your enemy? Like, what are you getting out of, putting this company down, making them look bad? I don't know what the answer is to that, but that was definitely the approach that they were taking. And Mike Johnson always would write about TNA from what felt like an objective perspective to me. So when I would see an article from Mike Johnson, I'm not saying I take it as the gospel, but again, his writing never sounded like he had something against TNA to begin with. And so it felt like something I could read that sounded objective. And so I'll take that. Now, Mike Johnson wrote, let's see, I'll actually pull it up for you here and read it. All right. He wrote that the Impact creative team going forward will be headed by John Geberg, Sanjay Dutt, and Scott D'Amore. He said it's not a case of Geberg being in charge of the creative team again. The trio will be leading the creative together with Dutch Mantell, Jeremy Borash, Abyss also having input. In regard to the report on Sports Illustrated's website that Anthem is seeking to sell off GFW, we're told that in meetings this week, all discussion was about plans going forward, and there was no inkling of plans to shut down or sell off the video library. We've heard nothing from the WWE in that such discussions are underway, and they would most likely be the buyer, or most likely be the only buyer. Although any discussions would be attempted to kept under wraps as long as possible, my belief is that with WWE in cost-cutting mode and having slowed down other aspects such as original WWE Network programming, they likely aren't looking to rush into a major acquisition. There was also a report circulating in the last day of Dave Meltzer on the Wrestling Observer that Anthem was shutting down the office in Nashville and moving everything to Toronto. We're told that during the meeting earlier this week, Ed Nordholm was asked specifically about this by a staffer and said there were no plans to do such a move. Long term, I think it makes the most sense for Anthem has a studio and an infrastructure in Toronto, so it makes more sense to have everything in-house as opposed to renting out studio space in Nashville. In regard to Karen Jarrett, I inferred several days ago that she was done here. That was an error on my behalf, and I apologize for that. I have been told that no decision has been made on where things stand with her. Jeff Jarrett's Twitter bio now says, several new projects on the way, bookings, email jj4jarrett@gmail.com. All right. So if anything, right, you can respect the fact that he put a retraction in there, right? That he said he wrote something that was incorrect and he apologized for that. But here's the thing. If you guys can take anything away from this, it's that people kind of jump to conclusions, man. Like when one piece of news comes out, people just take it and run with it. So you don't know. Like you just don't know, man. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. You got to, read it for what it is, accept it. If there's anything useful to it, take it. But for the most part, a lot of this is conjecture, man. And a lot of these people are just jumping out the window, looking for stuff to get a headline click. So, we're all fans here. So you can choose if you want to jump on and, give them the clicks and find out about it. But the reality is, if you just wait a couple of days, we'll probably find out the real story going forward. Now, here's what I was thinking as this was all going on. When the news first broke, when the SI article came out and all of that stuff, I can't lie, man. Mentally, this transported me back to the place when the news first broke that Spike TV was going to be dropping TNA Impact Wrestling. That's where I was, man. That's how I felt, man. That day was the day that I felt like the Impact brand died. The news it hit hard. It got circulated so much. And that just felt like the true moment that in the eyes of the public, TNA was a dead brand. And in reality, it wasn't dead. It was as close as possible, but it wasn't dead. You know, Dixie Carter managed to keep it alive and hop from network to network that was looking for programming over the course of the next 2 years, eventually landing on Pop TV and eventually, you know, selling to Anthem. And I think those of us who have been watching this whole thing play out, you know, we kind of had the feeling like, okay, this thing's going to get a fresh start, right? This thing's going to get a fresh start, and we're gonna see what this thing can possibly be. And when they brought in Jeff Jarrett, I had so much pause, man, because just like I said, you know, people have given most of the blame for the bad of TNA's past to Dixie Carter and Vince Russo. But let's not forget, man, Jeff Jarrett was right there. Jeff Jarrett was right there. Can I say specifically what his role was? No, but he was there, right? And so he's certainly not blame free for some of the bad booking and bad production and all of the stuff that people have cited as reasons why they stopped watching TNA. You cannot absolve Jeff Jarrett for any of that, right? And so when Jeff Jarrett came back, and then when he was prominently featuring the GFW titles and GFW characters, I just had so many doubts. I felt so skeptical. It felt like something that was being done in a shady way, and it made the people from Anthem look like they were getting hosed, right? It made it look like Jeff Jarrett was hired as, you know, like a chief creative officer, and he was going to come try get his GFW brand over so that he could take that back out on the road. And so that didn't seem right to me. That felt so weird, and it just didn't make sense. And eventually, once we got to, what was that pay-per-view? Slammiversary. So once we got to Slammiversary, and they did the thing where, you know, they merged all the titles, it felt like a fitting end to the TNA story. And I was cool with it. You know what I mean? I was cool with it. It felt like the real ending of a chapter for the purpose of starting up a new chapter. And so it made sense. I was still skeptical about Jeff Jarrett as, you know, the head of the business, because we can say what we want. He hasn't successfully run a wrestling organization yet. You know, we can say he's been in the business for X amount of years and it's in his family and blah, 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 blah. The reality is he hasn't successfully run a wrestling organization yet. And so, experienced he may be, there's no reason to think that he would be the man that can necessarily make this thing work. Now, when the news came out of, you know, him being out of shape at AAA and, you know, having blow-ups and fighting with Ed Nordholm and all this stuff, and I'm just like, to be honest, I was kind of glad when I heard that Jeff Jarrett had been dismissed. Not because I want to hear anybody lose their job, but it kind of gave me the feeling like, okay, it's not like Jeff Jarrett has immunity here to just do what he wants and just run wild, right? Because again, Jeff Jarrett has never run a successful wrestling promotion, right? So to put your money behind him and just say, do what you want, you'd have to think that you're going to end up the same way that most of his other wrestling promotions have ended up. So again, if the people at Anthem were smart, they would have been skeptical of Jeff Jarrett as being the man in charge. And it turns out that they were, right? It turns out they kind of had their eye on him, and he had one slip up too many, and they decided to put him on leave. So, you know, what this really means, we'll still find out, right? We'll still find out. Publicly, I think this was a big hit because it got people back to talking the, you know, is GFW on the way out talk. And, you know, they say you can't unring a bell. And I think that's appropriate for this situation, because whether or not Anthem is really looking to sell, people believe that this company is in a constant state of turnover, a constant state of you know, perpetual failure. And so hearing something like this, it it only reinforces what they already feel. So when people get the reinforcement, the affirmation of something that they already think, it's just going to let them continue to believe that that's the way this is going. So this definitely didn't do any favors, right? This week did not do the GFW brand any favors. We'll see what's to come. Do I know? Do you know? The reality is no. No one really knows what's to come from this company. But I don't know, man. Once again, the sad thing in all this is that the shows have been really good. And nobody's talking about the shows. Nobody's thinking about the shows. People are sitting here wondering, well, I heard they don't have any tapings booked after November, right? And so everyone's just expecting this to be the end. And to be honest, can we truthfully say that it's not? No, we can't, right? So GFW put out announcements about the Global Wrestling Network and partnerships they have with all these international companies and all that other stuff. So who knows how this is going to go, right? I mean, this feels so up in the air. But from my experience dealing or watching a struggling wrestling company, where there's smoke, there's fire. So while the things that were reported obviously don't appear to have been 100% true, my antennas are up, man. My antennas are up, and I'm watching, hoping that it's not the case. But I just would not be shocked if we were to hear that something is going down.